Welcome to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everybody, this is Perrin for Niche Site Project 3.0, and this is our fourth coaching call. I took a week off, so I hope you guys haven't been too bored in the meantime. And as always, I have Colleen here. Colleen, how's it going?
It's going good. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, same to you. And I know you're in a conference room, and so you've got a little bit of static, and so I'm going to remind you if you are on mute. You're going to be kind of muting him and unmuting, but hopefully we can get it figured out. So for this one,
I'm being sneaky, and I'm at work in a conference room. So.
Man, tisk. I remember when I was doing the same thing. So for this call, we've got some exciting news, right? So far, it's just been theory, but now we are happy to say that we have launched, right? And what's that mean?
It means we have a site.
We've got a site and
articles.
We've got articles. I think when we last left off, the assignment was to write one article, but because we had a week after that one, you have written quite a bit. And I think last time I checked, there are 6 or 7 articles up. Is that right around the number?
I think I have at least 12.
12. That is amazing. That's a pretty good chunk of the number we were shooting for, which was 60. And that's changed, and we're going to talk about that. But still, 12 articles is a whole heck of a lot to have on a site to get going. So awesome job. How does it feel for you? Actually, let's go to this next slide here.
Okay.
Just basically, let's let you talk about what the ups and downs have been for this first phase of doing the actual work, getting the site up and running, and starting to post content.
Yeah, and sorry again, guys, if I'm a little staticky, but I was really excited to get going, and I kind of hit a slump, honestly, because I realized how many articles I needed to do. 60 is a giant number. Plus, just like kind of the things going on in life, having a job and trying to prioritize that, trying to put the niche prioritization.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think we get you. Yeah.
Into my life. And, I think I kind of got overwhelmed. But talking to Perrin, I kind of was able to get out of that slump and make myself small chunks. I felt at first like I was digging myself a hole. I needed to write so many articles in so little time, but it's a lot easier if you break it down. Like, for example, I told Perrin that I was going to have 4 articles done in, I think, 4 or 5 days. And then since I kind of am assigning myself homework, I feel like I have to stay true to it.
Yeah, and at the risk of embarrassing you, I think we had a really interesting and useful conversation about accountability on Facebook. Do you remember that?
Yes.
How did that go? And, I'm not trying to bust your chops here or anything, but it's something that I personally have struggled with. I get this all the time from readers, and so I think it's really useful to talk about. So maybe tell people what we were chatting about there.
Yeah, so I kind of asked you to be my accountability person, and Perrin came back and said, I think that you have to have that drive to complete it. It can't be on me. You need to push yourself and motivate yourself to complete these 60 articles and really want this. And I mean, especially for myself, I'm planning to quit my job, and I want to go all in on this. So it was kind of a turning point, I think, in the project for Perrin and I, just because I realized how I needed to get down to business, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, it feels like losing weight, right? Like, I've been super fit in my life, and I've been super chubby a bunch of my life. And every time I go on a super fit spurt, or, when I go through those periods of my life, like now when I'm trying to be like really fit, I always come to the same realization, or the realization, that it's not about anybody else. It's about me. I'm not going to hire any personal trainer good enough that's going to make me go to the gym every day, at the end of the day, it has to be about my decision and my goals. And I think that's a really important thing to realize when you're going out and trying to build an online business, is that it's your business and it's your life. And even though it can really be tough and demoralizing and painful and feel like a total slog through the mud, it's your business, and all of the awesome benefits that come with it after you execute are going to be yours. So I think it's just important to keep that in mind. And it's also important to keep in mind all of the awesome stuff that you will get if you do the work now. So I just thought it was a really good, interesting conversation, and it fits in nicely to what are the ups and downs at this phase in the site. So
yeah, and I think it's also important to keep, even though the end goal seems really far away, I think it's helpful to make mini goals along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have found just by writing those 4 articles, I was like, yes, I made that deadline. I'm going to make another. And so I just have to motivate myself and keep going down that path.
Yeah, and anybody who's been in the corporate world has heard of SMART goals, right? I'm sure. SMART goals are basically, it's some kind of acronym. I can't even remember what it stands for. But the idea is to not set goals that you can't control. Like, you can't set a goal of like, I'm going to make $100,000 a year with this website, because there are just too many things that you can't control. What you can control is, I'm going to post 4 articles this week. That's a good goal, and you can do that, and it'll help you feel accomplished, and it will move you towards the stuff that you want, like making $100,000 from one website, which is certainly possible, that you just necessarily can't control. SMART goals are about controlling all the little parts of the process. So I think you did a really good job with that. Let's talk about, and you've touched on a few of them here, but let's talk about some tips and tricks that you found to meet those deadlines you were setting for yourself and to make the writing a little bit easier.
So one thing that I've been doing is I take a ton of OneNote notes. So a lot of the articles that I'm writing, I'm actually learning about what I'm writing as I'm writing it. So I'm doing research and I'm finding out more information. And what I've found is I'll search the keyword, I'll open a ton of tabs, and just go through each one of those websites, see which ones apply to what I'm writing about, which ones have good information, and I'll read each one, take a ton of notes in OneNote, and then kind of organize them, and then I can easily put them into an article. And I've also found that that's really helpful because I'm flying a lot for work, and so I don't always have internet, so that's also kind of a nice way to work offline.
Yeah, and that's kind of an adaptation of a process we talked about privately, which I affectionately call the crazy tab process. And you can read about this in an article on Niche Pursuits. I think it was so long ago. It was during my niche site project, but it was something like how to write 1,000-word article in under 45 minutes or something. But the idea is basically to take a topic, plug it into Google, open as many tabs as you can, quickly delete the ones that don't look useful, and then for the rest of them, give them a quick read, and then take and adapt the information that's useful to your article, add your own commentary, build on it with some of the other research that you found, and you can use that just as like a huge pool of information to draw on. So I really like that approach. It's a good adaptation to aggregate all of those notes, all the stuff that you find interesting and didn't know and are learning, into like a notepad. And to take it with you offline. So I think that's a really good research process. Do you have any other tips and tricks, maybe even emotional tips and tricks to help you get through this part?
So I did set calendar reminders for when I need to have my goals down. And so it reminds me one day, Colleen has to have 4 articles done by this day. And I also wanted to let the readers know the 4 articles, I was also on vacation in the Bahamas. So I don't want people to think that I've been lazy.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think you have been. So with all of that, after a couple weeks of posting content, I think there are a few good takeaways that we can share with other people who are probably doing this same sort of thing themselves. The first and most important is what you are doing right now, and what a lot of people are no doubt doing with their own sites, is probably the most difficult part of the process. I know when I started my site last year, I spent 2 months writing 50 or 60,000 words, which may have even been overkill, but It was my nights and my weekends, and basically every free moment I had, I was writing articles, and it was super, super, super hard. It's easy to have fights with your spouse when you're spending that much time with your, head buried behind your computer screen. But it's necessary, and you really only have to do it once, because when a site starts to make money, then you can pay other people to write the content. So that's one lesson. Related is the idea that building a site is a way to front load your work. Okay, so anybody who's out building a site now, especially anybody who's doing a legitimate white hat authority site like we are trying to build, should understand that this is not something where you don't have to work. This is a lot of work. When I estimate the work that I put into my current site, I usually put that number around 500 or 600 hours, which is quite a bit. However, I did that in 2 or 3 months. And then after that, I put very little time into the site, aside from some strategy and managing people and letting the site earn money and that sort of thing. And so it's been growing, and I've still been doing stuff, but almost all of the work, like 80% of the work, happened in the first 3 months. So even though, Colleen, it really stinks now and it feels heavy, and writing a whole bunch of articles isn't fun for anybody. I mean, honestly, you're writing about as much as or about as many words as there would be in a novel, right? Like
That's
30
crazy.
or 40,000 words is a ton of content.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, it's really insane. But as much as it stinks, you are putting in almost all of the work you are going to have to do for the site as far as like raw hours right now. And then it's over, or mostly over, and you can start spending 1 or 2 hours a day, and then maybe a couple hours a week, and the site becomes passive after that. But right now, I like to think about it as just front loading all of the work instead of spreading it out over time. Another thing we found out was that writing's not the only hard part, right? So we ran into a couple issues with content strategy and site architecture. Not really issues, but just problems we had to solve and questions we had to ask of the site. And I think the main one is you have to choose a direction with very little data and very little statistical validation. And I think we're going to talk about some of the pivots we made, but maybe you can talk for a second about the problem of just like having a site and not knowing where it's going. Did you feel that way at all?
Yeah, I definitely felt that way at first, because even though I had a lot of keywords, I had to kind of think about how are they going to work together, or am I going to write separate articles for each one? And then also just thinking about how is this going to work long term? Because if I kind of talked to you about this earlier, I found a really good keyword, but does it make sense for the site? So that was something that I was kind of struggling with and needed direction.
Yeah, and we had a good conversation there too, where you were like, can I do this? And my answer was essentially like, it's your site, bro, like there's this, and that's why it can be hard at this stage, because there's no paint by number. There's nothing, you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work for your site. You're going to be trying lots of different types of keywords, lots of different types of articles, and you're just not sure what works for this particular market. So you just have to make judgment calls sometimes. What do you want on the site? What do you think would be cool? What do you think would be valuable? What do you want to work? What do you want to try? What does your gut tell you about a certain type of content? And you kind of have to answer those questions for yourself, And it's one of those things where the onus was switching from me to you as you sort of take the theory and put it into a concrete form, into your own actual site where you're the ringleader,
Yeah, and I think one of the problems that I had is I'm looking at so many different sites, trying to do research and look at different things, and they all have so many different articles, different strategies, and so it's kind of easy to go a little ADD on it and want to do everything, I think.
Yeah, and at this point, maybe we are, but we also want to limit ourselves a little bit, which I think was part of the struggle there. But overall, I think we found some good solutions, and that's kind of what this next portion is about, is the adjustments we made from a couple weeks ago, and, our sort of lofty ambitions then and what we're doing now. So first adjustment we made was publishing, or we are going to publish fewer articles. So we were shooting for 60, and now I think we're going to shoot for about 40. So there were a few reasons behind this. First of all, writing stinks. Second of all, I don't think we necessarily need 60 articles to start. We really just want to get money coming in the door. We want to validate the ideas, and we want to see which types of content work the best so that we can scale those more. I don't think we need 60 articles to do that. I think we only need about 40 articles to do it. I launched A Penny Shaved with like 15 articles, and it was fine. So we want to make that move for those reasons, and also because we want to start doing marketing and promoting and link building sooner rather than later, because I feel like that's going to be the engine that really drives the site, right? So 40 articles instead of 60 was kind of my call, but it's based on sort of what I think is the most efficient process. Did you have something to say? I heard you kind of chiming in there.
I was going to say the little engine that could.
The little engine that could.
Yeah.
Our little batch of 40 articles.
Yeah, but I think that 40, I do feel more comfortable with that. I don't know why 20 seems like so much more. But
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it just does, right? I think there's also a difference between a professional writer and someone who's not a professional writer. And I'm not trying to take you down a peg or anything, but writers are just used to pounding out words. So for me, 60 articles didn't feel like as tall of an order as it might for someone who isn't used to doing that every single day, day in and day out as their professional trade, which I did for like a decade. And I think I take that particular mutation for granted, like it becomes sort of a weird thing that a lot of professional writers are able to do, is just sit down and type for 5 hours straight. But it can be tough if you're not used to it. And even the less I do it, the less I really like to do that sort of thing. So I think it's important. And I think that your articles so far have been absolutely stellar. I think they're really great articles. But you have said that one of your biggest strengths is talking to people and communicating by email and making friends. And so we want to leverage that quicker. And that'll be through the next phase of the process. So we are going to do more of a minimum viable product approach and launch the site with about 40 articles instead of 60. We are also, and this is related, we're going to do 2 categories instead of 5 or 6, which is what we'd planned. Colleen, why are we doing that?
Because then we can focus on specific categories and focus on all that link building on 2 categories instead of a wide variety. Plus, easier with articles, right?
Yep, and I think it just felt to both of us like we weren't going to adequately cover lots of great content with 5 categories and 40 articles. We needed to niche down a little bit more. And these 2 particular categories could really probably be sites in themselves. They're very deep categories. We found lots of great keywords. And so having 2 categories with 20 articles apiece, I think is just a really good start, and probably better than having 5 categories with 8 articles apiece, which is what we would end up with 40 articles. Plus, I think also, like, when you are writing, you are becoming an expert by learning so much about this stuff. And so it'll be easier for you to take all of the expertise you are accumulating by learning about these 2 specific things and writing more articles. So I think it's a more efficient way for you to build on the expertise you're gaining. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we also have the opportunity to expand into those categories maybe later down the road.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's not an option, but I think it is better to focus on just those 2 for now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we are not abandoning the other categories. We still have lots of great keywords for them. We're just focusing on these two to start because it seems like it just makes more intuitive sense. Okay. The next decision we made is to spend money on writers. So we've got a $500 budget. With a budget that small, you usually have to pick one thing or the other. So we know that our site needs content and our site needs links. With a $500 budget, we've got to pick either writers or link builders. And we decided to go with writers. Why did we do that, Colleen?
Because Colleen's struggling a little.
I don't think you're struggling. You just seem to be feeling the weight of all of the articles, I think.
I am, and I think that I'm also excited to start working on link building and learning about it and reaching out to people too. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's also a speed thing. So we want to get to that phase as soon as we possibly can. And by reducing the number of articles and hiring people, we can hopefully get there even sooner. Also, I think your skill set is just really well suited for link building. I mean, your skill set's is well suited for both these things. I think your research skills are really top tier. But I feel like you probably have more fun with link building. I mean, based on what you've told me anyway. And if we can start moving into the link building phase a little bit sooner, hopefully we can make money a little bit sooner too.
Yeah.
All right. Is that my last one? Yes. So we are downsizing our launch plan to something a little bit more manageable, and we've decided to hire writers. So the main lesson in this coaching call is going to be on outsourcing. So I've got a bunch of stuff prepared about outsourcing, but before we get into it, I know you had some specific questions about outsourcing, so maybe just lay those out, and I will leave them floating in the ether for suspense's sake, and then we can answer them hopefully in the next part here. So what are your questions about outsourcing and moving into more of a management role and hiring writers?
Well, one of the concerns that I have is that I feel I write with a lot of voice. And so one of my concerns is if I hire writers, they will have their own voice. So do you think that that will not create a cohesive, its own voice within the site? Or do you think it's okay to have different voices, different writers, even if they're noticeably different?
Sure, let me jump in here because there's an answer and I don't cover this later. But actually there are two answers here. So first of all, it's totally okay to have more than one writer on a site. You know, every major media site probably has hundreds of writers, and many small sites have teams of writers. So having different writers with different voices isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as the articles have the same values, the information doesn't contradict other articles, and that sort of thing. So overall, having a different writer with a different voice isn't that big of a deal.
Okay.
Also, however, what a lot of sites do, including some big sites like Health Ambition, which is Guile Breton's site, they will create a persona. So you might create a persona of a soccer mom who is learning the particular skill that your site is teaching, or maybe she's already an expert and she's got the voice of somebody who does X, Y, and Z and prefers 1, 2, and 3, whatever it is. You can pass that information along to the writer, saying like, this is the persona you should be writing under. These are the types of things this person would say, and that sort of thing. That's a little bit of work. It sometimes takes a little bit of extra work with your writers to really nail it, but a lot of sites do that. They will create a writing persona, and they'll use that persona for both the blog and for outreach. And the big benefit of that is no matter who you hire, you can keep everything relatively similar, and you don't have to significantly alter the voice for every new person you bring on. So there are two ways to do it. Personally, I just hire different writers. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Cool.
So yeah. And then what are your other questions?
My other question was, what type of articles do you think are really good to outsource? Do you feel like there are ones that you're like, oh, this keyword is going to be great to send to outsource to someone versus writing it yourself?
Yep, I've got that information. So that's a really good question, and we will answer that. Do you have any other questions?
I might think of one as we're going through.
I think
so Was there one that I
You had a
talked
question
earlier?
about sourcing, right? Like everybody knows there are companies who source it. What are the good ones and how do you find them?
Yes,
Cool.
that's right.
Good. So we've got a few to answer, and we definitely will cover those. So before we start getting into anything tactical, I want to set some expectations. Can you outsource all of it? Absolutely not. Or at least you shouldn't to begin with. This is your site. You have to know what's going on. If you just outsourced every single article without learning the subject material, which is what you are doing right now, Colleen, and without checking it or understanding what the audience needed, understanding what people were saying about the products, which is what you do by writing articles yourself, the quality is just not going to be good, right? So you have to understand your own site and your own content and your own audience before you can outsource it. This is a question I get a lot. Can you outsource everything? Technically, yes. Should you? Absolutely not. You have to do the first part of the work on your own site so that you understand it, right? And if you're not going to do it, you should have, and maybe you are running a business or you are working as an actual manager with a bigger budget, then you might want to hire a really good editor-in-chief who understands the content really well. But somebody has got to understand the site, the audience, and the content. And with a budget this small, it's almost always going to be you. So can you outsource everything? No. And I don't think you ever would do that, but I get that question a lot. So that's one expectation. I also want to set another expectation. You cannot buy a ton of content with $500, okay? And I don't think we're going to spend our own budget, but we're going to spend some of it. Or I mean, our whole budget. The typical rate, the industry standard rate right now is about 3 cents a word or about $30 per 1,000 words. That's not a whole lot, right? So we're going to be pretty lucky if we get 15 articles for $500. I think that's pushing it. If we can maybe work out a discount or trade some services or something. So we can't buy a ton of content with $500. The question you might have then is it still worth it? I think it's a resounding yes, especially if you are feeling mentally drained with writing, which a lot of us get that way, or if speed is one of the important things for your site. And we have decided that for our site, speed is important. And also just to hand off some of the workload so that you can focus on other stuff and you can practice outsourcing. It's a really important skill. So by outsourcing some content now, you are getting to market faster, which is always a good thing in any business. And you are starting to put systems in place that'll be really valuable to you down the road when your site's making money and you can outsource a lot more. You'll already have that stuff in place. You'll be a little bit used to it. So yeah, we aren't going to be outsourcing the whole 40 articles, but it certainly is worth it for all of those reasons.
Plus, just to add, I think it's also really fulfilling and rewarding to start to see your site
100%.
fill out. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of times what happens to people is that at least for some types of content, they'll start to get really excited about that. And when you see the site start to look full, it becomes really exciting, and it's easier to be proud of, and it doesn't feel so much like you're just opening a Word doc and pounding away. It becomes a little bit more fun and definitely fulfilling for sure. And even more so when you start getting traffic and visitors and maybe even a little bit of revenue. But yeah, totally true. So we're not going to outsource everything with this budget, but still worth it and still rewarding. Another expectation is that you still have to write, and this answers your question, what's good to outsource. So outsource the stuff you hate the most. I know for me, with my sites, and actually I'm going to add an addendum to this. There are some types of articles I hate writing. I just cannot stand writing them. I have to force myself or had to force myself to do it, and I just absolutely couldn't stand it. Those are the ones that I outsource. Because part of the goal of outsourcing is to save yourself some headache and to save yourself some stress and to not just hate the work, even though it can be really hard right now. So outsource stuff that you dislike the most to a professional who's used to just taking some directions and running with them and creating good content. Most of the time, you can't expect other people to love the stuff you hate, so you should expect to edit this stuff. But it's usually the best idea to outsource the stuff you hate the most. I would add to this also that you should not outsource things that require lots of different research. So with my current site, some of the stuff can be medical in nature, and no, it's not like a nutrition site or a medical problem site, but some of the stuff can be medical in nature. That information must be correct. So I do all those articles even if I hate them. But in general, it's a good idea to outsource stuff you dislike the most. Does that answer your question for that?
Yeah, it does, definitely.
Cool. And then one last expectation, and I think this is really important. You are the editor, you are the Q&A department for your site, and you are the fact checker. Your writers are not responsible for quality. You want to pay good writers and give them, and you want to find writers who can write quality articles for you, but you are responsible for the quality of your site. So if an article needs editing, that's up to you. If the topic is boring, that's your fault. If you publish an article and there's a backlash, it is your responsibility. And I think that's really important because a lot of people tend to just hand keywords off to writers and post whatever they get back. I think that's a terrible decision, and it can get you in a lot of trouble with your audience. Not necessarily legal trouble or anything, although that's possible, but it can get you in trouble with the people who are reading your site down the road if your content is lackluster or missing something or giving bad information or bad advice. You can just go downhill. You know, if anybody's been watching the Fine Brothers fiasco, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. So I think it's really important to remember, especially when you start outsourcing, that you are the editor and the owner of your site. The quality is your responsibility, and the buck stops with you. I always want to point out that content needs to be good. The quality needs to be high. It doesn't need to be just unique. It's got to be good stuff. You want people to read it and click on stuff. In order to do that, it has to be good. And getting content that is good, even if you're outsourcing it, is up to you. That makes sense?
Yep, it does.
All right, so let's move to some tactical stuff. How do you actually do it? The first thing is to pick a good source. I want to quickly run through some of the options for outsourcing content and talk about some of the pros and cons. I've done all of these. I still often use all of these types of content sources, and there are pros and cons to each. Usually what happens when people start outsourcing is that they'll find one that works well for them and just stick with that, and that's totally cool. Some people's personalities work better with some content sources, and some people's personalities work better with other ones. I use all three extensively, and you can pretty much just pick one here, but there are pros and cons to each, so I want to run through each of them. So the first content source is agencies. Agencies are places like TextBroker or Word Agents. A lot of people have used these before. Back in 2011, 12, 13, people use these extensively to just churn out content as fast as possible. But it doesn't work as well as it used to, and it takes a little bit more work on your end to work with an agency now. But it can still be really useful, and from my personal site, agencies are probably the one that I use the most, which some of you might be laughing at because I used to say, don't use agencies at all. You're never going to get good content. You should always hire other types of writers. But I do use agencies now because there are a couple key pros. First of all, it's fast. Agencies are going to deliver content probably the fastest of anybody, and you don't have to baby them. Usually you don't have to baby them because you can probably find some good project managers, especially at top-tier agencies. A top-tier agency like Longer Days will have really, really good, extremely professional career project managers who will take care of everything for you. You'll never have to talk to a writer, and it saves a ton of time with editing and figuring out processes and hiring and all that stuff. So somewhere like Longer Days is a really good example of what you can get if you're willing to spend a lot of money. We won't, of course, but it can be a huge perk. You can get lots of revisions. Agencies don't have feelings. You're not going to offend them if you ask for a bunch of revisions or changes, or if you tell them you need to tweak something moving forward. That's one of the things they do best, and they will usually only have to be told once because they tend to document everything. So that's a big plus. Plus, probably the biggest benefit here is large batches. I think for my personal site, I added 70 articles last month. I didn't write anything, and an agency did most of it because they're equipped to handle large batches of content with no problem, right? They have lots of staff, lots of employees, lots of systems of their own, and so they can do it. When you start making money and you want to order lots of content quickly, agencies are usually a good place to do it. So that said, there are some cons. First of all, they can be expensive. You're not just paying for writers, you're paying for editors, project managers, overhead. Agencies have all that. So sometimes it can be expensive. They're generally pretty competitive, but usually you're going to pay more for an agency and competitive-ish rates on marketplaces like TextBroker and iWriter, which are places I'm kind of lumping into this agency category. Secondly, cheap ones can be terrible. Most agencies will have tiers of content, and if you go below the top or second to top tier, they can be really, really bad. And it's almost not worth it to spend money on them because you will spend more time editing than you would have writing. And so then in that case, you're just losing money, right? Thirdly, it's very easy to get B+ content out of an agency. Very, very, very extremely difficult to get A+ content out of an agency. Usually what that means is that you have to spend some time editing, but if you're looking for somebody to produce exceptional, epic, knock it out of the park home run content, an agency is almost never going to do it for you. So that's a con. It also can be tough to find good ones, right? And even if you do find a good one, sometimes they are taking on so much volume that it is just difficult, right? So examples of good agencies would be TextBroker and iWriter. An example of, and those are sort of like marketplaces where you can go hire your own writers. They're really good. An example of like a top tier hands-off agency would be Longer Days, and something like maybe Grad Savers or something. So the trick with agencies is to give them either a great article template, meaning the instructions for an article that outline every section, every instruction step by step, or a really great project manager. You need to find a great project manager, or ideally both. So if you provide great instructions and you have a good project manager, you're going to get stellar content. And that's usually how you develop a system where it's almost totally hands-off, which I am lucky to have for my own site now. I have a great project manager. He knows exactly what I like. I gave him great instructions, and now it's pretty seamless. Any questions there, Colleen? Thoughts? Comments?
That makes sense. So we probably will not be using agencies, right?
Correct. We will not be using agencies just because of our budget limitations now. I certainly would recommend it as you scale and when the site starts to make money. But right now, it's probably not the best choice. If somebody's out there and they don't want to do much writing, they want to, for example, write 5 or 10 articles and then buy 40 articles so that the site can get up and running fast, an agency would probably be a good solution. The next one, something I love to do, is to hire friends. If you remember my blog post about hiring and managing writers, you will know that I've hired my own brother, I've hired Spencer's uncle's wife, I've hired the wife of my old philosophy professor, I've hired my dad's old administrative assistant. I've hired college friends. I hire friends all the time. I think it's an excellent way to get content. It's an excellent way to give people work, so it kind of makes you feel warm and fuzzy. But there are also lots of really strong business pros to hiring friends. First one is they're usually really, really, really easy to work with. People who you know are often the easiest to say, hey, why did you do this stupid thing? You should probably do that again. Like if you know somebody really well, they're not going to be offended. If you just work with them and talk to them and how they think, they know how you think. So the working relationship is usually really strong. And that's a huge benefit if you've ever tried to hire a writer. Also, you can sometimes get discounts or trade services. Maybe you're a graphic designer. You can do awesome infographics, but you need content for your site and you hate writing. trade an infographic for 5 or 6 articles. Or maybe you are a developer and somebody needs some CSS for a site to make a cool thing look better, whatever it is. Friends are the people you can most easily trade services with. If you go to an agency or if you hire a professional writer, that can be hard. People want to get paid money. Friends are often okay trading services. They often care a lot, which is good, and also it can be really fun. If you have a fun project, you're giving them fun work, you're paying them well, it can just be fun to work with friends. I typically kind of like it. So the cons are disputes can be a pain, and they can really kind of hurt. If you don't want to pay somebody because the work's terrible or you have to fire somebody, it can be really hard. Nobody likes to do that. The solution, of course, is to only hire good people to begin with, people who you know are strong writers. So that's usually the way to get around it. But if you run into that, it stinks super bad. Also, often when you're hiring friends, they may not be career writers. So their stuff needs a little bit of polish. And often when you hire your friends, there will come a point where you just have to take the article from them, pay them their money, and then do the rest of the editing and the polish yourself. It's just not going to be the best writing often, which may not be the case if you have a friend who's like, some great writer or something. But most of the time, if you're hiring friends who just happen to be pretty good writers, you're not going to get, like really insane quality or anything, and you have to plan and do some editing. However, it's usually like super fast, super easy, and one of the cheapest, and in my view, pretty fun. So I have hired plenty of friends, and I will continue to do so. And I even have a couple people who I care about who are in other countries who basically work through me and my friends for a living. And that's kind of how they make their money, because I'm always happy to pay for content. So do you have any questions here or comments?
I'm just racking my brain for all my friends I can use.
I know, yeah, you got to start hitting them up. So trick here is to tap into your social networks and be very clear about expectations and directions. For me, I know a bunch of writers because that's what I did professionally for 10 years. So I usually just have to kind of send out a Facebook message and I'll get a bunch of replies. Maybe you don't, but, everybody knows someone who at least knows someone who's a writer. And then be very clear about expectations and directions. You have to do that in order to avoid disputes. You don't want to get into business arguments with your friends. So you want to really clearly outline what you expect from them for X amount of dollars. Give them examples, give them a really great article template, that sort of thing. Usually the best people to hit up here are students and new college graduates, because those are the people with good writing skills who don't have jobs or have part-time jobs or who are looking for jobs. So try those. The last one is to hire professional writers. I also really love this. Some of the best contracts I've ever made with writers have been just professional writers who I found in marketplaces. When I say professional writers, I mean people on pro blogger forums, on the Reddit for Hire network, on Upwork and Elance, people who are writing as a trade. These people have a really pretty huge upside. Firstly, it's usually the best quality. Out of all of the options, the individual professional writers will usually have the highest skill set. So if you want A+ writing, this is probably your best bet if you're not going to do it yourself. They're usually extremely good at understanding directions and writing excellent first drafts because this is their trade. They are used to working directly with clients, so they're used to being their own project manager. They hate doing revisions, and so most of the time, one of their primary skills is creating an excellent first draft. And usually, with the people I hire, I have to edit them very little because their first drafts are so good. Thirdly, if you treat them well, they will hit home runs for you over and over and over again. I have one writer in particular. After we nailed down the process, I gave him bonuses. I gave him lots of compliments, told him how much I appreciated him, gave him excellent reviews on Upwork so that he could get more work from people. And he hits home runs from me every single time he writes. So having a great relationship with a seasoned professional writer can be one of the biggest assets to your business, especially if you're going to give them consistent work. So that's a major upside. With the people who write for my site, I really just give them keywords at this point, and they send me back amazing articles, and that's the ideal situation. Lastly, it's usually the quickest and easiest way to automate. So with a seasoned professional writer, you can train them to do exactly what you want. In many cases, you can even train them to post on WordPress. And because it's a single person, because they're usually so professional, because they know exactly what you want and you have trained them, you have to do very little work. So very little editing. Sometimes you don't even have to post the content. They can do it all themselves. And if you pay them and treat them well, they will do great work all the time. So very easy way to automate. It's a quick way to automate. It's not as scalable as, say, using an agency, but it's still really awesome. So the cons, if you hire a professional writer, bad ones can be a massive pain. I have many times paid for work that I didn't use just because I didn't want to keep dealing with a terrible person. So they're out there. Sometimes they can be tricky about showing you portfolios that aren't theirs and that sort of thing. So it can be tough to hire. And if you find a bad one, they're a pain, and you will probably lose some money. They're often the most expensive, and rightly so. And even if there are cheap writers out there, but if you're going to do this, it's worth it to pay a little bit more. So maybe instead of 3 cents a word, you might pay 4 cents a word, which I often do. But for that quality, you're going to pay a little bit more. There are lots of bad ones out there, like I said, and there are just inherent problems with marketplaces like Upwork and ProBlogger, which is going to be like lots of spam, lots of fake people. Sometimes there are problems with escrow and that sort of thing. So there are just inherent problems with the places you will need to go to find these people. But in my opinion, the upside usually outweighs the cons for these. So, do you have any questions about this, Colleen?
Yeah. How many bad writers do you feel like you went through before you finally found the one that you work great with?
Not many. So usually what I'll do when I hire these is I will have one test article, and I'm basically planning to invest in the hiring process here. So I'll hire 3 or 4 people to write a test article, and I will pay them all to write the same article. So maybe it's 1,000 words, and I'll pay them each $40. So maybe $120 just to find a good one, and then I will take the best one. And if you're looking at everybody's portfolio, talking to them a little bit, seeing some of the other stuff that they've written, it's usually pretty easy to figure out who's probably good. And then if you have 3 of those, odds are you're going to land on at least one. So I didn't make up this process. John Haver talks about it a lot, but just testing out 3 with a sample project and telling them that if they do well, you have a lot more work for them, will usually find, or will help you find at least one good one. That person may not be your golden pony or whatever, but you can at least find a good writer that way. And if you do that a few times, hopefully you can find 1 or 2 writers that you really enjoy working with. And when you do that, it can be super fun. So the trick here is to pay more for better writers, provide excellent article templates, offer long contracts if you can. I wrote about this in my article about managing writers. Writers love long contracts, even if it's lower money, because they love consistent money, because freelance writers just don't get consistent money a lot of the time. Also, writers are emotional people a lot of the time, so a little bit of flattery, lots of smiley emojis, honestly, like really, like lots of emojis and exclamation points goes a really long way towards your working relationship with these
So
folks.
what you're saying, Perrin, is that since you're a writer, I need to be flattering you more and sending you more emojis.
100%. You like.
I need to step up my emoji game.
Oh yeah, 100%. And actually, it's really funny. I like when I'm looking back at the chat logs for the writer that I like to work with. Just the sheer number of smiley faces is absurd, because we both do that, because I think we both understand writers, So yeah, it can be a little bit ridiculous, but writers tend to kind of live and die on words of affirmation. So just saying good job, smiley face, even if you're gonna like give them criticism in the next line, goes a long way. And and you'll get a lot better work for it. So if you haven't been paying attention, I want to draw your attention to the common denominator here, which is article templates. You need amazing article templates. Oftentimes, because you are creating the content for your site, you have to come up with your own. But if you have amazing article templates, it will save you and your writers, whether they're your friends, an agency, or a career writer, so much work in the long run, and the writers will love you for it, right? A lot of people make the mistake of having like huge templates because they think the more detail they have, the better. That's almost not the case. I mean, nobody wants to read 5,000 words of, like how to write this article. And to some extent, you have to just trust your writer to do his or her job well. So in general, your article templates should be clear. They should be concise. And by concise, I mean, honestly, try to get it under one page like a resume. They should be simple. So don't be convoluted. I see that mistake more than any other one. And they should be full of examples. So link to articles that you really like. And not just articles that you like, but articles that look exactly like what your writer should be doing. Also give them examples of finished Word documents. So say, here's what the finished project is on a website for reference. Here's a Word doc, and I want you to make yours look exactly like this. Or say, like, here's the type of sentences that I like. Here's the type of sentences that I don't like. That sort of thing. See if you can fit all that on one page. Sometimes you go a little bit over. That's fine. It's not a hard and fast rule. But clear, concise, simple, full of examples is the key. You have any questions about that?
No, I think I'm good.
Cool. And Colleen, we will work together on some of the templates for your site. And we'll probably come up with some good ones. So you tell me, Colleen, after hearing about all of those options for outsourcing, knowing that you want to outsource but have not hired somebody yet, what do you think is your preliminary plan? You don't have to have a hard and fast plan right now, but what do you think you will like the most, or what sounds like the best idea?
Well, I think that I need to figure out what I hate the most first. So as soon as I figure out what I hate the most, then I can try to outsource it. But I really like the idea of using friends to do some of that. And plus, I was also thinking while you were talking, for my site, I know some people that, may have studied it or know a lot about my topic. And so I'm kind of thinking, maybe I could hire them or, take them to dinner and get some of their thoughts on stuff too.
Totally.
So I'm definitely brainstorming.
For sure. And that's honestly what I usually do first, is hire a few friends to help. It's like, building a house. You want to, or like moving.
Oh, are you still there?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. I really thought you were going to mess up the mute button first, but it turns out I did.
Oh.
You win. But
you thought I was going to mess it up?
What I was saying, though, was that's usually what I do first, is I hire friends. And it's kind of like moving, right? Like, nobody likes moving, so everybody always kind of pitches in to help each other move. You can kind of treat your site the same way. Just say, hey, guys, I need a little bit of help. What can I do for you? You want to go to dinner? You want to have a pizza party? Do you need some of my services? Or, what kind of money would it take for you to write this article? You tell me, because we're friends. So I think it's a really good way to work on a site and outsource content if you're in kind of bootstrap mode, which we are. So I think that's a really good first choice, and then we will probably talk about it more and report back. Hopefully we can outsource at least a couple articles this week and then see how it goes and talk about it a little bit more next week.
Awesome. So maybe I should start working on an article template for you.
That would be the assignment, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't write this, but I will show you some of my article templates, and then you can write your own article template. And I think the assignment will be to outsource maybe 4 or 5 articles, to hire one of your friends or whoever else you want to. Maybe it's an agency, maybe it's a professional writer, but to outsource 4 or 5 articles and see if we can get them published on the site. Plus, we definitely want you to still be writing, even though you probably won't write as much this week because you'll be trying to hire people. We definitely want you to not outsource, but to produce some content yourself. So hopefully by this time next week, we can maybe even be getting close to like 20 articles on the site, which could be cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right. Well, do you have any thoughts or any other questions before we sign off?
No, I think I'm good. I'm ready to get going.
Cool.
Thanks, Perrin.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's good to see you guys again. We hope you got a lot out of this, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.